Welcome back to the Passion with Purpose podcast, everyone. We are going to be talking about so many different topics today because you guys, those who added to my Instagram story, that is, contributed these questions. And so this is kind of like a Q&A episode. I haven't done one of these in a while, and I'm really happy to do another one because sometimes I just want to know what you want to talk about. I got different things like, should we give family and friends discounts? How do we deal with haters? How do you establish your personal brand? Creating margin, boundaries, talking about how to get in with planners, how to talk about politics or not talk about politics, how to tithe, any of that kind of stuff. So we're going to go into all of these juicy topics. I'm excited, also a little scared, to be honest, but I think it'll be great. I love talking about the type of things that you want to hear about. So let's do it. Coming in hot. And again, by the way, I put these on my Instagram story, like a little Q&A box. So if you don't hang out with me on Instagram, if you don't watch my stories, come hang out, because then you can put in a question like this and maybe I can cover it on a podcast, because I do these every once in a while. So without further ado, let's get into this episode and let's talk about these topics. Okay. So starting up, number one topic coming in hot. One of you asked me, how do I handle when family and friends want free or discounted work? All right, let's talk about this. So what I'm going to tell you is this. I am not going to give you like, this is exactly what you should do, because I think it's different for everybody. And I actually think the industry has a lot of shoulds in this topic that I don't think need to be there. And so I'm just going to give you what I do. Okay. And you can take from it as you would like. What I do is, number one, I never feel obligated in a situation like that. Like if I have a family or a friend, or even like a friend of a friend who comes to me and asks me just inquires for their wedding. Maybe it's like through a text. Maybe it's not actually through my website, or it's just like through a conversation like that. I never feel obligated, because if I start off with this obligation of I have to give them a discount or I have to give them something free, I just know I'm not going to be in the right headspace to take on this project. And I'd rather just give it somewhere to somebody else, to a different photographer, especially if I'm going to give them a discount and it didn't actually come from my heart, it didn't actually come from me wanting to do it. That's just serving that friend or that acquaintance poorly. So I'd way rather just give them to somebody else, or say, hey, like, I'm not the person for you. Or if I really want to do their wedding, or I really want to do their project, and I think to myself, okay, I do still want to get paid for it though, because I don't really feel like this tug to give it to them for free or give it to them discounted, and I want to get properly compensated, then I just completely quote them what normally would be in that type of a situation. Okay. And you don't have to ever feel like, discount is required, or discount is expected, or free is expected. Like, don't ever feel that. If any friend or family member makes you feel like that, that's on them. But that's, if it's ever awkward, that is on them. That is not on you, that you did anything wrong in that type of a case. They should know better, that, hey, you are their friend. If anybody, you should support that business owner the most. Okay. Now, my second category that I fall into when it comes to friends and family doing work for them is if I genuinely am like, I would like to bless you. I would like to bless you with either something free or something majorly discounted. And in those types of cases, what I a lot of times do is, if I feel desirous of that, or I feel called to that, I do it, and I give them either something that's nearly free or something that's majorly discounted. And I love to go big. Like, I'm like, hey, if I'm called to discount you something for your wedding, like, I don't want to give you 10% off. Like, to me, I'm like, that's not even worth my time. I want to give you something that's like big time, like 50% off, or like 80% off, or something like that, because I do think that is, just for myself anyway, that is just like on my heart in those types of cases. But I will say this, almost always I will make sure there is some sort of transaction, like minimum of $500 to $1,000 that they actually have to pay me. And by the way, you can give it back to them later. Don't tell them that you're going to give it back to them. Maybe you give it back to them as like a wedding gift after their wedding is done, or something like that. But having that price, having something that's transacted between the two of you, and I'm not talking like $10, I'm talking like make it like at minimum $500, but maybe more like at minimum $1,000. What that does is it keeps the legalities clean. It keeps you having a price point on the actual contract. And then on top of that, it gives them some skin in the game so that they're not just like, oh yeah, we're getting Nate for free and whatever. No, like put some skin in the game on their end, because truly they need that intentionality. I will say this. There have been a couple times, actually one that specifically comes to mind, where I quote unquote blessed people with like a free shoot, and it didn't turn out well. I felt like they didn't really regard me with respect, and they just kind of like walked all over me in many senses. Now, in the end, I actually didn't even end up shooting their wedding because they broke up and realized they didn't want to even get married in the first place at that point in time. So maybe that was part of the issue. But in that kind of a case, again, I do think part of it was they would have given me a lot more respect and respected the craft and respected my professionalism if they would have been paying something. So for that reason, I do think it's really helpful for you to put something on there that they do actually have to pay. I think being just free is kind of asking for it. But then this is my last point in this, okay? And then we're going to move on. Send the contract and invoice. I don't care if you give somebody something for free. I don't care if it's like 90% off discounted. Give them the same dang contract and invoice that you would have given the fully paid client, and put on there the discount that they're getting, but show what the price would have been. Because when you do that, I do think subconsciously people see it and they're like, oh, this, like, my friend usually charges 7,000 for a wedding contract. Like, that's what they're worth, but they're giving it to us for 1,000. Whoa. Like, they need to feel that. I'm just saying, I do think that's a good thing for them to feel, to understand, hey, I'm giving this to you as like a blessing or what have you. But at the same time, this is what we're talking about here. This is the actual nature of this, is that it's a $7,000 value right there. Okay. For example. All right. Hopefully I covered that one. Pretty gross detail. Second question, you guys got me. How do I deal with haters or bad energy from peers in the same industry? Ooh, juicy. All I can say is this. I've been there myself, and in some big ways that I will not get into. Had to let stuff go. And yeah, I'll just say this. Biggest thing is, like, don't let people rattle you. Don't let them get under your skin. I've fallen into that a couple of times, letting people get under my skin, and it just doesn't help you. It actually only hurts you, and they don't know maybe if they're under your skin, and so they're not getting. It's kind of like forgiveness. It's like you genuinely have to forgive some people so that you can release that tension within yourself. I think you need to let people like that go. And if you've already, let's say, tried to be the bigger person, tried to make amends with the person, tried to be a friend or settle a dispute, if it doesn't work and they don't want to settle it and they don't want to be nice and they don't want to play fair, whatever it is, it might be time to step away from whoever that person is. Maybe you need to unfollow them. Maybe you need to mute them. Maybe you need to not take part in what they're doing, not do collaborations with them, not whatever that is. And on top of that, find people in the industry that you do trust, because I guarantee you there are people out there who you can trust and who you can be close with, and who can be your confidants and encouragers within the industry. I think where I have gotten caught up is sometimes I lose trust in maybe one person, then I apply that to other like peers in the industry, and it doesn't go well in that way. And so you really want to make sure that you have this like hopeless hope in everybody before you write them off. And so that's why I would say, yes, there are probably some haters. There's probably some people who don't like you. There's probably always going to be that, but there's also probably people who would really like you and who would be amazing and encourager type people, companions for you in the industry. Find them. And also remember that sometimes on a place like social media, especially, you could be reading someone wrong, as like reading them as a hater when really they're not. Or B, let's say someone you feel like is kind of a hater. I've had this happen before, where you feel like someone's kind of a hater and you kind of have proof to proof to back it up, but then they kind of come around later and they end up being really nice and they end up changing their ways. And that can also happen too. So hold your identity of certain people as quote unquote haters loosely, because you never know. But then again, if someone's not on your team, that's okay. You don't have to try to put yourself right next to them all the time. You can step away. Don't let them rattle you. Seriously, let them be there. We all have those type of people in our life. Don't let them rattle you. Okay, another question that you have is how do I balance parenthood and business? I think I've covered this one before, but it's good to cover it again. Um, I feel like I can only speak to my specific scenario and circumstances, which are, and I'll just be so frank with you, my circumstances are I am the main quote unquote breadwinner, whatever that means, whereas my wife is the main caretaker in our home for our one daughter, Aria. So we only have one kid right now. We'd love to grow that. But at the same time, like that is the reality. So we don't have five kids. I'm not the primary caretaker and primary breadwinner. Wow. Can I talk? And so if those different elements were mixed in, it probably would look a lot different. But what I will say is that my wife and we have specific expectations set on what each person is doing, what our responsibilities are, when our like quote unquote on parenting times are, and when our like work times are. And Kayla even has that too. Like she has times where she is not the caretaker, she is working or she is doing something else, and I'm the primary caretaker, or if there's like a babysitter or something like that. Biggest thing I would say is make sure you know what you can and cannot do. Know your limits. Don't feel like you have to be this all in business owner and all in parent simultaneously and do them both perfectly all the time. That's a lot. I'm not going to sit here and say parenting is this easy thing. No, it's actually really challenging. And it's really challenged me and my wife, and in the best way. But I do think you got to know your limits and you got to know what you can and cannot do. The other thing I'll just say too, on a more positive note, is work for your kids. Let them fuel you. Let those little faces, those little cheekies, let them fuel you to work hard for them. Remember that your kids are not a distraction, but they are the main thing. They're who you're working for. And obviously they can distract you, but at the end of the day, like put your phone down sometimes. Put your computer down sometimes. Be with your kids undistracted. And also remember that in the alternative times, being focused on your work and closing your door and putting your head down and working on your business, if you are the breadwinner, if you are the one who is bringing in financial stability to your family, doing that right there is being a good parent to them. Okay. Like you providing for your family is being a good parent to them as well. So it just depends on, again, like what's your calling? What is God calling you to do? And I know I'm speaking to a wide audience, so you have to kind of discern what that is for you. But that's what I would say. And that's what I've learned so far with my minimal experience. Here's another question for you from you guys. How would you further establish your personal brand beyond just social media and your website? This is great. I talk a lot about personal branding, so I think this is where this is coming from. I love personal branding because the whole point behind personal branding, just to bring you up to speed, is it's attaching the value to you as the person, not just you as the professional. So it's personality, right? It's making people enthusiastic, not just about your photos, but about working with you as a human being. The big missing link that I'm not hearing really from this question is in person. So social media, website, that's both digital. That's like your digital footprint. But what about your in-person footprint? I think that's the big missing piece here is your in-person brand is part of your personal brand. When you go and attend a photo shoot, when you go and attend a wedding, when you are treating people a certain way at a wedding, when you are treating the clients, when you're talking to the family, when you're talking to the bridal party, when you're talking to the vendors that you're working with, when you're talking to people just out anywhere at a coffee shop, wherever you are, your personal brand is being represented in those specific places. I talk a lot in my business blueprint, my coaching program, about these two parts of a personal brand in many ways called your personality traits and your character traits. And the way I like to distinguish it between those two, because I think sometimes people, when they think of like, oh, I need to be my authentic self, right? And that's how I let my personal brand out. So let's unpack that. Your personality is one thing, and your character is also another thing, and both are important. Let me give you an example. My personality traits, for example, would be that I'm kind of an ambivert, not super introverted, not super extroverted, but kind of in the middle. I am somebody who's really emotional. I'm somebody who's really passionate. I am someone who I like to express myself a lot. I like to talk. I like to write. I like to do a lot of those types of things. Those are my personality traits, like, right? Like that's like if you meet Nathan Chanski, that's what he's like. Now, character traits. There's also some character traits that I have developed so that I'm not just this raw, uncooked version of myself, which is that I like to be trustworthy. I like to be honest. I like to have integrity. I like to be a positive influence on people and a positive energy to people. These are some character traits. Okay. Now, at my core, I'm not always those character traits. Some like at my core, if I, frankly, it goes back to like the Lord saving me. But at the end of the day, like you take something like service. Okay. I am not at my core the most quickly to serve person you've ever met. Like sometimes I can get selfish, right? Like as we all can. But having a character trait of I will be a servant-hearted person in my business. So see how that's like a character trait? It's something you develop. It's something you commit to. It's something you say, I will be this type of person, even if it doesn't naturally come to you when you wake up out of bed in the morning. Okay. And so I do think both of those things are what you want to flesh out in your personal brand. So how can I flesh out my positive personality traits? How can I flesh out these positive character traits as well in person? All right, let's talk about another question here, which is how would you suggest a husband learning video so you can do a duo, also while still trying to make money and not being broke in the process? Yeah, this is a great one. It's interesting because I've heard this one before, actually on a live coaching call with my students, and I'll answer it similarly. Make sure he has buy-in. Like, make sure he wants to do it on his own, regardless of whether you're pressuring him to do it or not. Because the last thing you want is to have something in your marriage where like you drug your husband into something and then he doesn't have the same drive that you do, and he doesn't have the same momentum and the same motivation and excitement that you do. That's not fun to deal with that. A, in a business, B, in a marriage, more importantly. And so make sure he wants this as much as you do. Now, of course, like we could split hairs over like who wants it more, right? I'm not saying like you have to split hairs. I'm just saying make sure he's got buy-in to some extent. And he's like, yeah, I on my own really want to do this. And I think that's like step one. I would never try to force a spouse into supporting your business because I just don't think it's going to go well. On top of that, you ask about how to not be broke in the process. See if one of you can hold on to a job while you start building this business. Even if it gets tight, even if time gets a little tight, you have to understand that entrepreneurship is a risky business and entrepreneurship is hard, especially right at the beginning. Like, go watch Shark Tank episodes and you'll understand like some of these couples that come in and the things that they've had to sacrifice, the time they've had to sacrifice to build these businesses. It's crazy, but that's the entrepreneurial way. Is there is a lot of sacrifice. There is a lot of crunch. There's a lot of tight spaces that you have to fit into for a time in order to build something. And so if you can have one person maintain a job while you both build on the side and do the best you absolutely can. And then when you've made enough money that you feel comfortable cutting ties with the job, do that. And maybe even a little bit before you feel fully comfortable, because sometimes you have to, again, take another risk and go into the business saying, we're going to make this work come what may. Okay. And then once you get there, do it together, make it fun, like have fun with it and step into your strengths. Maybe he's more analytical. Maybe you're more creative. How can you guys both allocate your time, allocate your skill sets to the things that the business needs you to do? I think that's a great way to do it. But I'll tell you this, I've seen so many couples do amazing things in the industry because they're working together. They have, it's like a two heads is better than one type dynamic. It's so cool to see. It really is. So if you have the opportunity to do that, I think it can be an awesome, awesome asset to your business. Okay, let's see here. Any system for creating margin and boundaries in your schedule while booking months and months in advance? Really good question. I think what this person is getting at is, hey, if I'm in January right now and I book somebody in October, how do I make sure that my October isn't slammed with editing, with social media, with shooting, with culling, with all the different things, because I won't know like at that point how much work I'll have. My thing back to you though is you do know, you can know. And here's how I would do this. I would keep a project manager. Okay. Not a person, but a platform. So project management platforms, you can look up one called Asana. That's the one I use. You can look up one called Trello. It's another one I think that's free. You can look up another one called Notion. I think Notion is free as well. And what these project management tools do for you is they can give you a way in which you can allocate tasks to actual dates so that you can check them off. Like you're like actually you're putting it all in the calendar. So that, and I mean, I have it down to a science on Asana specifically where I put in there a template, how, all the different steps that I have to do when I book a wedding. And it's like, okay, like I shoot the wedding, I get home, I got to do the previews, I got to back up the photos, like I got to edit the call, send it to my outbound editors, do whatever it is, deliver the photos, send the text, all these different steps, right, that have to be done. I can literally create a template so that all I have to do is punch in Jack and Jill wedding. They're getting married on the 27th of October. Boom. It all auto-populates. Not only does it auto-populate with tasks, but it auto-populates the dates that each task is supposed to be completed on. So what's really cool about that is like months in advance, I can see what my workload is going to be on that specific month preceding and afterwards. Okay. And so it's really cool to have these project management sites so you know what's happening and what's coming. And on top of that, know your limits of like, hey, how many weddings can you take? How many shoots can you take for a specific month? Know that for yourself, because you might be like, hey, my capacity is I can only do one per weekend, so I can do 4 per month. Or you might be like, that is way too much. My tippity top is 3. Maybe you're like, hey, I want every other weekend off. I only want 2. Okay. And so that way you can really see way far in advance what is coming. You know your limits, you know your boundaries, and you also know what individual tasks are coming up. Okay. So that's my best advice to you. And also just know that there are seasons. that October may look a little heftier than your February. It's okay. That's the name of the game. Sometimes as a photographer, there's a season for hard work. There's a season for stepping back. But I do think it's really helpful to, again, allocate it all out to the specific dates and adhere within the limits of your boundaries that you've set for yourself. And by the way, pro tip, try to have at least one day off per week. It's good to have a day of rest. Okay, let's see here. Let's keep going down the line with more questions. Oh, we got a lot coming up here. Here's a quick one. Someone says business insurance, yes or no? Big fat yes. Big fat yes, business insurance. You do want business insurance. Main reason, because someone can sue you, period. Like, yep, even if you're an LLC, I know someone told me once, they're like, oh, well, they can't sue you if you're an LLC because they can only sue your business. And so that means that, yeah, even if you're an LLC though, do you really want your business getting sued for a lot of money? No, you don't. So get business insurance, be responsible. You want it. And by the way, a lot of places, they won't even let you book them at their venue, or they won't even, a client might not even want to book you if you don't have business insurance. So make sure you do it. All right, here's another question that I could probably ask a little more briefly. How do I get in with planners? So I'll give you a brief, because this could be a whole episode, but I'll give you a brief summary of how I'd answer this. Start with planners you have worked with or that you know. It's always going to be easier to get in deeper with people who you already have a foot in the door with. From there, I would say find people who you are acquainted with. So you have some sort of mutual friend, and you're going to have to exhaust your resources in this area. So you might be like, oh, well, there's no way I know anybody who, knows that person. You might go find them, go stalk them a little bit. See if you have any mutual friends on, I don't know, Facebook, or see if someone you know is following them on Instagram. Even if it's someone like from your high school, or someone from like a church you used to go to, or a workplace you used to go to, get in touch with that connection and be like, hey, I'm really trying to get in touch with this planner. Is there any way you could do an introduction for me over text, over email, something like that? Use your network. Squeeze the juice out of your network as much as you can, because it's so much better coming from a friend than coming from just a cold email or a cold DM. Then I would say if you move down those lines of people you've worked with, people you know, people your friends know, okay, now we're talking cold outreach. People that you don't have any affiliation with, you're just cold DMing them or cold messaging them or whatever it is. And this way, I would say be realistic. Try to make lateral moves or slightly higher than lateral moves in your industry, meaning you go for a planner who would be a good fit for you. So if you're just starting off in the industry in your first 2 years and you're shooting, let's say, like $3,000 weddings, I wouldn't go for the planner who books luxury weddings and books with photographers who are booking at like $15,000 or $20,000. Okay. It's going to be very hard for you to do that, near impossible. And I don't think your time is best put there. Maybe one day you can get there, but go for the planner who actually wants to work, who's sending their clients to photographers in your price point, in your experience level, maybe a little above. Maybe try to stretch it a little bit and try to go for a planner just out of reach. That's great. But be realistic as well. And also remember that they want to see in your portfolio the things that they want to have in their portfolio as well. So if they are showcasing beautiful wedding estates, if they're showcasing East Coast style and everything that you have is like mountainous and everything you have is West Coast and bohemian and maybe even like Midwest barn, it's just probably not going to fit very well. So you want to make sure that you're giving the same thing they're giving. Okay. If it's not, then either you got to change or you got to change the person you're reaching out to. And I'm going to stop there because we could literally go on and on and on. Maybe that's a different podcast. Okay, let's see. Oh, last thing I'm going to say, get in person. Get in person with planners. Try to reach out to them at a local event if you can. Okay, here's a juicy one. And I'm only covering this because many of you put this in the box. How do we handle the current political climate with the pressure it creates? So yeah, politics, politics, politics. How do we handle it? And I don't know exactly if you're asking me like what to say. Definitely not going to tell you what to say. But what I will say is this: you got to do what you believe is right at the end of the day. And you have to do what the Holy Spirit tells you to do, whether it's to say something, whether it's to say nothing, whether it's to say something this way or to say something that way. I will say, there is a time and a place to educate yourself before speaking. And I think there's a lot of people who jump on bandwagons or succumb to peer pressure, but really don't know details or nuance of a situation. And so they just jump right into, well, I'm usually affiliated with this political party, so I'm just going to like speak out on this, blah, blah, blah. Right. And it's like people just jump on these headlines and partisan clickbait type stuff. All I'm going to say to you is like, you don't have to jump on any bandwagon. Right, left, middle of the line. If you don't feel like you have an informed opinion, which I actually do think a lot of people feel that way, especially recently, that's okay. That is okay that you don't fully know and you're still exploring things and you're like, I know a little bit, but I don't know everything. I do think that there's a time and a place to learn, and there's a time and a place to think critically without speaking up. There's actually a proverb on that. I wish I could pull it up, but I was just thinking about that today in my prayer time, that sometimes there's a time to be silent, and the one who speaks too much is not wise. So I do believe that. And again, you got to do what you got to do. I have my own philosophy on like what I do or do not say on my platforms and what I choose to speak about. But yeah, you got to do what you got to do. And at the end of the day, if you're a believer, follow the Holy Spirit. Which brings us to the next one, which is very similar. Somebody says, how and should we share our faith alongside our business? Well, to the should question, I'd say totally. Why not? I think more than ever, yes. Like my identity is in Christ, and unlike politics, my identity is not in politics, even remotely. And so my identity is ultimately in Christ. And I do believe that that is something that we are called as believers, if you are a believer, to speak about. Obviously, I think everybody's called to a different way of speaking about things and different formats. But at the end of the day, I think for myself anyway, I talk about it this way. I say, if I didn't talk about Jesus, the most important person in my life, it'd be as if I didn't talk about my wife, or I didn't talk about my daughter. I didn't talk about something that was so clearly obvious in my life and I just hid it away. That would be so weird. So I talk about it. I can't hold it in because it genuinely is my favorite topic to talk about. And number two, I can't hide it. Like that is the reason I'm in business. It's the reason for any success I have. The Lord guides everything that I do. It'd be so weird if I didn't. I wouldn't feel right about doing it. I don't even know if I could be on a place like social media if I wasn't talking about Christ, because I'm like, what am I doing here if I can't be a light? Right. So my vote is yes, but you got to do what you got to do. And let's see here. Here's another good question. How or should we tithe? And someone says, like, I don't know if you've covered this before. I have covered this before, but I'm so willing to cover it again briefly in this format. So my stance on tithing is a bit weird, and I don't want you to just take my word for this, please. Too much pressure on me. I want you to listen to this and be like, huh, okay, interesting. That's what Nate does or believes, and that's interesting. But I don't want you to just take my word for it and be like, okay, I'm going to do that. Okay. You research yourself about it. Now, let me define tithing. Tithing is a religious act that is rooted in the Old Testament scriptures and elsewhere, and I'll go into that in a minute, of basically taking a tenth of your income and giving it to the local church, the local ministry. Okay. So a lot of people do it. And I think there's great aspects of it. Now, I will say I don't fully believe in tithing at it as it is explained and as it is almost required by the modern evangelical Western church because of a lot of different reasons. I just don't know if it is, while it was heavily touched, well, actually, not even heavily, while it was lightly touched on in the Old Testament, the idea of tithing, giving the tenth, I don't believe it's necessarily required for the New Testament church, meaning us. Rather, I do think that the tenth is a good starting point. A tenth of your income is a good starting point for what to give out of your abundance, out of your income. And by the way, I would say not just to the church. Yes, I believe in supporting your local religious establishment and pastors, but the tenth going to the church, I believe, and if you look up history, to my understanding, it really comes from like the modern idea of tithing. If you look into it, it really comes from the early medieval period between like the 6th and 9th centuries, where church leaders were increasingly teaching that Christians should imitate Old Testament tithing. And so the tithing at that time almost became like this moral obligation, not just generosity. And by the time then of Charlemagne, 8th and 9th century, tithing kind of became this legally enforced thing in parts of Europe and collected like tax. And then even in the medieval church, tithing became fully law, basically. And then by the high Middle Ages, tithing, yes, is like this mandatory thing. And if you don't pay your tithe, it can bring on penalties. And so the funds were basically at that time supporting things like the clergy, the church buildings, and in theory, the poor, the relief of the poor, which debatable if that actually got to the poor. Now, this system basically lasted for centuries. There were obviously cracks in the system, especially around the Reformation, with Protestants like Martin Luther, I believe John Calvin as well. And then as things kind of escalated, modern evangelicalism, like our day, that's when like the tenth, the tithe, 10% of your income going to your local church idea kind of had this revival. Okay. All this to say, if you actually look at the Old Testament versus the New Testament, the New Testament rarely, it actually, I've looked it up, it doesn't talk about the tenth at all. Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've truly done a lot of research on this, and it doesn't talk about the tenth at all. But what the New Testament does teach on is general generosity and open-handedness, which is the one thing that's spoken about by those early post-resurrection church leaders, especially Paul, and then obviously pre-resurrection, Jesus himself. It was generosity. It was this idea of giving. It was not just giving the tenth, but it was giving in general and having a heart of giving. And yeah, I'm not going to go into all that, but all this to say, this comes down to this idea that the tithe is ultimately an Old Testament, Old Covenant construct in many ways. I don't think that it's irrelevant for now, but I do think it is putting the idea in a box. And I think it's making it more Pharisaical in a way rather than doing it from a place of desire and wanting to glorify God. So again, all this to say, if you want to know what I do, what my wife and I do, on any given day, we could give money to our church or someone's GoFundMe for their sick family member that comes our way, or someone's order at their grocery store. If maybe their card got declined, or a local organization that we fundamentally believe is doing God's work, right? Mainly anywhere we fundamentally feel called to, we're like, let's do that. You know, what's in front of us? Where can we give to that God's putting something on our hearts or in our path right here? Okay. And I think secrecy in that is important. That's why I kind of hate sharing this kind of stuff, because I'm like, I don't even want to share that we do some of this stuff. And I named some of these things in general because they're not specifics. Like some of those aren't even specific to what we have done necessarily. It's just like, those are things we're open to. Because it says, don't yet let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. And so I think you should give out of a place of, we're not getting anything back from this except for the Lord. He knows and he's going to reward us however he wants to. Okay. And again, we're not told how much to give in the New Testament, but I think that's the whole point. You give from your heart. You don't give mathematically only. Sure, 10% is a great starting point if you like. And yeah, absolutely. But I would also say ask the Holy Spirit what he wants you to give and who or where he wants you to give it. That's what we do. That's my biggest advice to you. But again, I do actually have a whole episode on this called Giving, Tithing, and Generosity as a Christian Entrepreneur. I published it on December 28th. It's episode 62 of Passion with Purpose. So check that out if you want more. Okay, last question. I wanted to put this one last because I just think this is interesting. Somebody said, everybody wants to be a photographer nowadays. There's this glamour to it even. But is photography the career path for everybody? What motivations, qualities, characteristics, desires should they have to, be successful in this field? First of all, great question. Very, very insightful. I think this is a great one to close on. I will agree that I can see that everybody in social media, a lot of people want to be a photographer, and photographers and videographers like kind of own social media because we create most of the content, right? Like photo and video runs these social media platforms. The big thing I would say is it comes down to what is your deepest why? Truly. Like, is it a divine calling from God? Is it a pure desire? Is it a act of service? Is like, what is it? Like, is it this desire to serve others? Because I think ultimately when you are in business, especially as a service provider, that desire to serve people has to be there. And I think it kind of has to flow out of you in a way naturally, maybe, that you're like, I do desire as like a calling, even if you may not be like the most servant-hearted person at your core in this area of your life, you're like, I so badly want to serve people in this. I think sometimes that's one of the first keys to making sure that this is the right field for you, because you will be serving a lot and a lot of times not get thanked for it. I think another thing is that you have a desire to work for yourself, to work creatively, and also to work hard creatively and to really perfect and work on your craft. I think what is tricky these days is that if you go out and buy a nice camera and you buy pretty presets, which a lot of people can do, and if you go grab some model couples and you grab a stunning background, hey, if you got that, like, not trifecta, whatever 4 is, if you have those 4 things, you can create some pretty beautiful images right off the bat. We're all like nodding because we're like, yeah, pretty much. So there is, in a way, a low barrier to entry, but that's where that like easiness stops. And I think that's where a lot of people get caught, is when you go to real weddings, real photo shoots, when you work with real people and tricky situations, it's not like that. There's so much self-discipline. There's so much unthanked work. There's so many tricky situations, and it's not all that glamorous. So you got to want it. You really have to want it, even when the glamour fades. And you have to, you got to stay consistent for a long time, even when it's hard, even when you don't see those immediate results. You have to get outside of your comfort zone often. I've had to get outside of my comfort zone so many times. You have to be able to risk financial investments in your business. Yes. Like, if you are not able to risk financially, I don't know if entrepreneurship as a whole is right for you, because you have to, in a way, put in money as an investment to get money out. Okay. You also got to be willing to pivot with a changing world and industry and generations as they come and go, unless you want like a 1-year career. But like, hey, every year there's something new. It changes every 5 years. There's something new. Every decade there's something new, right? You also got to have some thick skin, because you work with some people that we all know can be tricky, and you've got to love the art. You've got to love creating. and you really have to love people, and you have to love serving people, especially in this capacity. So I think that's what it comes down to. One of my friends says, he's in business too, and he says, I don't ask for God for more money. I ask God to send me more people to serve. And I think that's the mentality that gets people very far in this industry. And that's the mentality that I think will serve you very well. So that's it, you guys. Great Q&A. These are so fun to go through. Thanks for being here. And I will see you guys next time on the next episode. Take care, you guys.